All right, hey everybody. We got attendees rolling in, which is great. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking time out of your week for another live MSP chat from Ninja. We've got a lot of good stuff for you today. Sales and marketing is the topic. There's a ton to talk about, and we've got a special guest that I want to introduce. Really happy to have here. We've got Kevin Clune. He's co-founder of MSP Growth Hacks. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks, everyone.
And we've also got Tom Watson is back. He's our channel chief advisor. Tom, thanks again.
Hey, great. Really enjoying putting these on and the value that everyone's getting out of these. Thanks for having me on this again, Jonathan. Looking forward to some great content for everyone.
Yeah, and it's great to see some familiar names and everything popping up. For anyone who hasn't been a part of one of these before, we've done actually 4 of them by now. It's really different than a webinar. So we really mean it when we say live chat. This is a chance for you guys to come on to engage with us, but not just us, engage with each other too. So let's go through a quick thing for people who aren't familiar with this, the format, or haven't used Zoom a lot, for the few people who haven't been using Zoom constantly these days. So Sammy, if you can open up the how to participate. Before we dive into the discussion, just want to cover a couple of things. First of all, this is going to be recorded, so if you want to be able to go back and watch this later, you'll be able to do so. If you have to jump at any point, don't worry, you can come back and watch the recording. You'll be able to share it with your teammates. But also, I mean, the big benefit's going to be from being able to interact live. So really glad everyone's here and engaging live here. So the way to do that is we're going to be using chat primarily. And you'll see the chat button down at the bottom of your Zoom panel. The one thing to note is that there's a couple, you can dictate who you're sending chats to. I can't remember what the default setting is. Just make sure that it's being sent to all attendees in addition to panelists. We've had some times where it's been sent to only to panelists. And go ahead and jump in there now. I mean, love to hear where people are coming from. Okay, yeah, default's all panelists. Thanks for that, Joshua. So make sure when you do chat in there, we want everyone to be able to see it, so change that to all attendees. Now, that said, if you do want to ask a question that is, for whatever reason, anonymous, you can go to the Q&A tab, and you can use that instead. And that's a way to either be anonymous, or if you want to like chat, you know, it's going to fill up a lot. If you want to make sure that a question doesn't get missed, feel free to drop it in there. We'll keep an eye on that too. The last thing is we want to hear from you. We don't want to just see text. You've got stories you're sharing. This isn't just for us to pretend like we have all the answers during these crazy times. We want to hear from you guys what you're trying, sales and marketing front, what your situation is. You're going to have a lot of good ideas, and we want you to come on and actually share those with us live on the air, so to speak. So there'll be different times in the chat where Tom may ask if you want to come on, and you can just raise your hand that way to say, yeah, you'd like to come on with audio, and Sammy can unmute you. So Sammy, thanks for showing that. Feel free, if there's any kind of questions as we go along, drop them right in the chat. There's not going to be kind of like a big long presentation here in Q&A at the end. So with all that said, let's go back. We've done our intros. Let's launch a quick poll, Sammy. Let's get right into it. So we wanted to know what everyone's current state of sales and marketing activity is. So based on all of this, you know, I've seen a lot of questions around this. Is it even an appropriate time to do sales and marketing right now? There's also people's financial situations may be very different. When you're talking about cutting costs, this could be an area that's one of the first ones to go. So just kind of interested, want to get people's thoughts on what's going on here. And you'll see that my answers, I'm totally being influenced by being a parent of small children and seeing a lot of Disney right now, working from home and trying to get anything done. So our options here are, it's frozen, ramping down, steady, ramping up. You're doing, actually, we're very curious to know, like, are you actually seeing more activity right now? Are there things that you're dialing up? If you haven't done that much, we want to know that. And then finally, yeah, is your marketing being handled by a third party? How much control do you have? So thanks to everybody for dying on answers there. I'm going to give that just another minute. And while we do that, Kevin, I wanted to kick it over to you. What are some thoughts? What are some things that you're seeing with the MSPs that you're working with in terms of activity levels, and I guess what's really been changing? What's the big difference right now?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people I think are struggling with is not only what to do, but who to, kind of who to market to. So if you're not a diverse MSP and you don't have several verticals that you're working with, let's say you're specialized, dentists, restaurants, commercial real estate, one of these areas that's been hit, they're trying to figure out, like, do I pivot or not? Should I start to invest in marketing to an audience that I know can't buy right now? And so that's, I think, one of the things to begin is it's not only what you're doing, it's really at a point where you're even evaluating, am I allowed to follow up my own pipeline? Do I need to start over, that kind of thing? So I'm actually helping people kind of address that situation now. And then we start to get into, like, okay, now that you know which direction to go, what road to get on, what are you doing from that point on as far as marketing tactics, strategy, et cetera?
Right, absolutely. And just looking at some of the comments here, I would actually love from people to put in the chat, are you specializing, to Kevin's point, have you specialized in a certain vertical? And specifically, has anyone found themselves where they had specialized in one of these verticals that's been hard hit? Would love to kind of get your perspective from there. But I see Don LaBerge is saying, had a door-to-door campaign ready to go, only knocked on a few doors. Like, this is changing. To your point, Kevin, I think there's the initial thing of who you're targeting and who you're thinking about. That's a much bigger issue. I mean, if you're marketing primarily to one of these hard hit verticals, you may find yourself having to kind of go back to the drawing board in a more serious, bigger way. If that's not the case, even then you're still looking at, okay, based on all this, the tactics I was going to use may have to change a lot too. And we're going to get into all sorts of this stuff. So we've got a ton of ideas around that, but want to hear from other people too. I want to actually so we did have a few people, a small number, but quite a few saying that they're ramping up. So I'm curious in the chat too, what is it that you guys are ramping up specifically? What kind of tactics? I'm seeing LinkedIn a lot. Kevin, I know you probably have a lot of comments about LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan, I saw one that was interesting here. Cameron Bodley says more in-house articles and content creation. And, that's interesting because I know yesterday when we connected, we were all talking about kind of using this time to create more content, web pages, vertical specific pages, that kind of thing. So maybe at some point later on, we might have Cameron, you kind of explain that to us in more detail.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We also have Jason's talking about changing email marketing message, looking to escalate the referral program. The referral program, that's a great idea. Tom, I know you got some thoughts on that. Let's actually dive into some of these things right away, right? Let's go back to LinkedIn. Kevin, what are some of the thoughts you have around maybe LinkedIn in general, or even more specifically, is there something different right now that people can be doing on LinkedIn that's going to help them stand apart, or that they should really be changing? It's, I guess, a new approach that's more applicable right now, considering everything that's going on.
So there's two major ways that I think people use LinkedIn to market. And one is more on like the business development side. They're, doing outreach, either they're automating it or they're using like Sales Navigator. And they're just hitting people, with DMs and trying to have those one-on-one kind of direct response conversations. And then there's other people that are using LinkedIn more as like a content platform to generate awareness, build engagement, and then, kind of put those people into a longer like brand strategy funnel. So what's interesting is those two strategies are kind of going in opposite directions right now. It's really hard, I think, for the people that were doing business development to keep doing it. Unless you've changed your message dramatically, you're going to have a hard time finding the same conversations you were having maybe 4 months ago when it was working. On the other end, like the data that we're seeing, and especially with the, campaigns that we're personally operating, and then the ones that, kind of the MSPs that we're working with are operating, is that engagement is like incredibly high, especially if you're using content that is like timely and relevant. It's about either COVID or a COVID related topic of what's going on like with your customers and what you're seeing right now. That engagement has been significantly high. I can even give you some numbers. I was comparing recently a campaign that was targeted specifically to MSP groups. And if you wanted to translate this to an MSP use case, you could say like, okay, if I'm a lawyer MSP, I'm going to go target law specific groups on LinkedIn. And so this is the targeting for the ads that we're generating. And what we're actually seeing is that previously we were getting at about a 1.75% click-through on those, and at a cost of 98 cents. In the last 30 days, using only COVID-related content, we were at 2.58% click-through and 69 cents per click. And then just this week, it's been 3.41% click-through and 52 cents per click. So you could almost say that from a content perspective, engagement is increasing and the opportunity is increasing, right? So it's just a matter of then how do you take that awareness that you're generating and people you're getting to your content and getting them to opt in, or basically setting up your funnel so that you can market to them later on when you're ready.
So Kevin, when you mentioned those conversion rates, what are we talking about in terms of what is the CTA there? Are you talking about contact us, or are you talking about downloading something?
So, in this case, normally it's about getting some kind of opt-in. So if you have like an event scheduled, if you have a newsletter, things like that, that's what you want to be using right now in order to capture this engagement that you're getting and all of these kind of brand impressions that you're able to generate for cheap, because it's not always going to be like this. It's we're at a time where if you can grab these kind of numbers, you get them, and you figure out how to then get the most out, the most out of that attention that you're getting, and then use it later on when you can put these people through, kind of a drip campaign or something like that that's more sales forward, maybe a few months from now.
That's interesting. So this kind of segues into something that I wanted to bring up, and Tom, I want to get your thoughts on this too in a second. But Sammy, if you could go under this heading, is it even appropriate to be doing sales and marketing right now? What's kind of cool about this discussion is we're already seeing within the chat, people are kind of blown by this. There may be some people who are still kind of wondering about this, but it sounds like a lot of people are like, well, yeah, we're not going to shut down. We're operating. We still need to get leads in the door. We're still going to be doing activities. So it's cool that that's kind of a point that we can go right past. But let's go into this link that says CPC stats. So this is something that you just heard some cool stats from Kevin about LinkedIn. This is a more general, more broad thing, but looking at cost per clicks for AdWords. And there was a theory early on that I think a lot of people had, which was, okay, so this initial shock with everything, maybe this is, to Kevin's point, a good time to get in there because maybe competition's going down. Maybe a lot of people are pulling back on their budget. And you do see that here in this chart. So this chart's showing, we're going back at the beginning of March through really just this last week. And it's showing cost per click did go down. The thing is, it's starting to go back up a little bit. And again, this is going to vary a lot depending on the keywords you're targeting, obviously. But overall trend, cost per click has gone down, starting to come back up. But I think it's a good indication that there is some opportunity here for the people who are in a position to keep their budgets going and to really go for it. So that's
Jonathan, on that very quickly. If you are an AdWords user, and especially if you had been using AdWords 10 out of the last 12 months, you actually qualify for a grant from them, which is basically free account credits that you're able to get. Now, if you do qualify, I would go get it immediately and start using it, because I have a sense that these numbers are going to start ramping up again once people are handed this free money essentially to spend on ads. You know, if you're getting a couple $100s for free, you're not going to care what your cost per click is. You're just going to want to get clicks. You want to get the most out of your money. So I have a feeling that, you know, that's going to cause some different behavior with AdWords competition once people are now getting this kind of like AdWords stimulus.
So Kevin, do you have a link, or could you find one that we could add to the chat there? Because yeah, I hadn't heard of that at all. So I mean, I think that would be
absolutely
great to know.
I can
yeah, and we can also
I'll look for it right now.
Cool, thank you. And also, not to derail things, like the great thing about us using this Google Doc is that's a live document that you guys, we can be, we'll go back and we'll update this throughout this session, but also after the session to include some additional resources and everything. And you guys can go back to this Google Doc at any time and check these resources out. So Sammy, actually, would you mind going back to the, oh, thanks for posting that. So Sammy just posted the link to the doc in the chat. So everybody can go into this. You can skip ahead if you like and see some additional resources. But like I said, we'll be updating this throughout right now live and also later. So let's veer over to, there's a comment that came up, a couple about referral programs. Like Jay asked, he saw obviously a comment about referral program. What makes a referral program work the best? What aspects are good? And there was someone, I'm going to scroll through and look for who it was that mentioned that they've been adding on to this. Would love to hear from you. But while I'm looking for that, Tom, we've talked about some paid stuff. I know you wanted to talk about some opportunities to invest in free marketing or non-paid stuff, SEO, things like that.
Yeah, that, and I wouldn't mind touching on the referral program too after that. But yeah, my big thing is that I think that a lot of websites out there, not speaking just MSPs, but in general for service companies, are not built out to the point where you're going to take advantage of SEO and get that organic search value way up. And in doing so, we've been talking the last few MSP chats about verticals and maybe other verticals. And most MSPs out there are going to have a number of verticals. I counted legal as my primary, but that was about 30% of my revenue during my MSP years. But I was in medical and manufacturing and construction and a couple others. But I would probably be taking this opportunity to look at the verticals that maybe aren't as affected by the pandemic and shutdowns, and maybe build out specific content about those, like an actual page for that vertical and why you have specialties in dealing with that, and then maybe associated blog posts to go along with that. So you're starting to build that out and build that organic search value for people finding out about that. And then also, my big thing is I would probably be minding my current clients for things. It's important to understand that maybe you as an MSP, maybe you're able to handle what's going on. Maybe it hasn't affected your resources as much, but there might be other MSPs where it's not working or they're not going to be able to accommodate the times. And my thing would be to calling my best clients and getting them on the phone and asking how they're doing, have a good conversation, and then finding out, hey, do you know anyone else in business that maybe they need some help right now? Maybe there's a piece that they need done that we're doing for you that'd be very helpful. I'd be having those conversations, which give you two things. They give you that connection to your clients. They're hearing you, your voice, that you care. It's not just behind a screen. And then you're also finding out information about the local business community and opportunities that might be there.
I think those are great points. And actually, there's going to be some more specific examples of ideas that you can use to do this a little bit later on. I want to go back to Jason Rinker. Are you up, Jason, for coming on? I'm just kind of interested. You mentioned that you're changing your email marketing message, but also looking to escalate the referral program. So interested in talking a little bit more about what the referral program constitutes right now. And then maybe we can get Tom and Kevin and get your ideas for what are some specific, I mean, Tom, you just kind of touched on it a little bit, but what are some specific things that are different about a referral program right now that you could be doing based on everything that's happening right now?
That'd be great. Looks like we have Jason on.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks for being brave and jumping on. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. So as far as the marketing message change to our email campaign, got this idea from some consultants that we work with, and they're advising us to change it to a help first message rather than what we've normally been doing, and really trying to segment our list out. So that's what I meant by changing our email marketing and delivering that help first message. The referral program, we've always used something like that, but really trying to do more formalization of that, not necessarily on a paid basis. Maybe that'll come into play, but really trying to mine that and leverage from our existing client base and seeing what we can do there. Also, referrals coming from centers of influence and really starting to just ask for those referrals. There's so much conversations going on within these groups, these organizations, that they should be able to put us in contact with those that are needing some MSP services.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, a really great point.
Someone's asking for some clarification on help first. If you could expand on that.
Yeah.
So help first was, how can we help you? And really understanding that we're here to serve. So, that is what we're trying to do, and not make it sound so salesy. I mean, can we help you with one of the things we've been leveraging as these folks go to a remote workforce and get that set up is, let's scan those home networks and see how secure they are. Providing some information, to protect them from maybe scams, fraud's up right now. Really, we're just trying to ask that question. How can we help? What can we do to help? And just seeing where that conversation goes.
I think that's great because it goes into such a big part of this is really just being in front of people, right? And finding the right ways. Now that this initial influx of work from home stuff is maybe trickling down for some people, finding ways to continue to stay in touch. We do have a couple of ideas about that. And I know, Kevin, you've got some specific thoughts in terms of being able to stand out and do some things a little differently. So Jason, I just want to thank you again for coming on, and definitely we can bring you back on for your audio too, if you have some more things to say. But Sammy, I want to kick it back over to Kevin for a second. We've seen a lot of this reaching out, wanting to be helpful, dial back to being salesy, which absolutely makes sense. And the initial thing was pretty obvious. Let's focus on the work from home enablement. But now that that's kind of been out there for so much, I know you got some thoughts on what kind of comes next. What, in addition to that kind of thing, you can be sharing.
Yeah, and actually, even back to Jason a little bit, the help first thing, that's actually something I've been talking with MSPs like the past few weeks, even specifically yesterday. I have one MSP that, isn't part of our community on MSP Growth Hacks, and he really, almost his entire business is dedicated to the restaurant industry. And so he's wondering, I can't just change verticals right now. Like, I'm too far deep into this. And so we are trying to strategize maybe on like how he can continue business development, continue his like email, and he does LinkedIn as well, but changing the narrative to just be, listen, like, I rely on your industry as well. I'm just as vulnerable right now as you, but we want to help. So like, can we buy a gift card? Can we do this? Can we do that? There are ways that industry specifically is like raising funds for their business. And so we even talked about like, buying a gift card from one restaurant, then donating it to an individual who lost their job in that industry, and then asking that person, what restaurant should I buy from next? You know what I mean? And then basically, you're still making contact with new businesses within the industry. They're still going to remember you specifically, who you are and what you do, but the narrative has totally changed. You're not selling them anything. And so if you can do like things like that are impactful with your time and your money, I think the next few months, those connections will start to turn around. The doors will open up again, and you might be able to reap some benefit from it. But that's kind of, to the help first thing, that's not what, you're not thinking about sales right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point. And I guess to circle back to maybe Jonathan, the content and those kind of ideas, I think along the same lines is education. There's information that people need, and specifically information that MSPs have. Instead of just chasing the narrative, which is like the low-hanging fruit, everybody's piling on the Zoom, everybody, the Zoom security issues, the COVID phishing scams, and all of that. Try to really dig deep into like what you're seeing, things that are going on with your customers, vertical specific challenges that people are up against, and then generating content from that to then distribute to people that you think will likely have the same issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is maybe thinking about it in a sort of different way. We hear all the time that you should be a trusted advisor, right? That you should be constantly, excuse me, being the source of information. I think there's a lot of good opportunities to still do that right now. I also think there's a lot of good opportunities to do what you guys are talking about, where it's not just being a trusted advisor, but being a good partner, like a good business partner, where you're reaching outside of your comfort zone. Even you're not necessarily even providing all the answers, you're providing connections. So one idea that I've been sharing a lot is basically doing what we're doing here. Try this with your client. I just saw a question come in the chat about webinars. I think we've seen a big shift, and this is really, it's been going on before this, like a lot of things with technology and the current crisis. There's a lot of trends that were happening before this started that this has really accelerated. And one of those is how webinars are being held. People don't see as much value. There's some topics where it makes sense, but people don't see as much value in being presented to you as often, right? Having something more live and interactive like this is where, I'm sure you guys have been getting invites to these types of things a lot now in the last couple of weeks. But I think there's real value in just bringing people together and having more of an open discussion. And so why not try this with your clients when you're asking about doing a webinar and specific topics? Maybe you have a specific group of clients who are all in the same vertical that you can get together. There's going to be a ton of value in you just being the person that connects all of them, and get them to talk about, have it be open. Going back to the point about what a great opening line is, how can we help? Just have it be more of an open thing of like, hey, let's get together. Let's have this be pretty informal. You guys can talk about your challenges. We're going to provide some good resources. We're going to provide the forum for you guys to do that. Could be a good suggestion. And actually, to that end, we're going to be coming out with a blog post that breaks down. I mentioned this in the session before. We've got it coming out tomorrow, I believe. Breaks down exactly what we're doing to set all this up, kind of point by point. I'll make sure that gets shared to everybody here, so you can have kind of a playbook for putting on something like this. Wanted to go back to specific ideas again. So Kevin, back to you with, in addition to thinking about using your tickets, referring to your real world experiences, what you're seeing with clients, and getting a sense of, okay, what are the actual problems people are dealing with right now? What's the good content I can create that answers that? What about thinking about what's coming next? So moving beyond this initial work from home shift to thinking about what's it going to look like when people are moving back into their office? What happens when some of these solutions that may be considered stopgaps, what happens when they're making the longer term commitments? How can you be informative that way? You got a lot of good ideas about this stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like a lot of people I think jumped into trials, which has been great for MSPs if they're leveraging some of their vendors to like put people into free trials, talk about like Teams and things like that. But eventually these are going to have to be permanent solutions. And so, because people want to be prepared, people, now everybody knows, okay, I need this infrastructure in my business in case either we're going to adapt it or we're going to need it in case we have to use it later on. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a big thing that I think people are going to have to figure out is one, like, what's my plan for getting back into my office from a technology perspective? That is going to be just as complicated of a transition, I think, than it was going remote. And then, on the other side, then what are the permanent solutions that I'm going to require going forward? As an MSP, I would definitely try to have some of these answers not only ready, but really start leading that conversation now. And so you go out, talk to your existing customers. It's, not only about generating new business, but like with your existing customers, how are you preparing them for this? I think, and especially, one of the things that we mentioned, like in a recent blog post was, we're talking about retention. If you screwed up their work from home transition, now's the time to redeem yourself by being over prepared to transition them back. So like creating content around that, creating checklists, that kind of thing, allowing people to really self-audit and know that, okay, like I'm ahead of the game now. I'm ready to get back to work. I'm ready to kind of resume a new infrastructure if I need one. And, I have everything in place because my MSP was proactive.
So I'd like to bring on Anthony Flint. If you're up for it, I think you bring up a really good point, and thank you for sharing in the chat. You shared things that have been working for you guys, and that includes offering discounts. So this is kind of interesting. We've been talking about the goodwill, help first approach. What about the tried and true? Hey, let's offer some discounts. Let's see if we can do it that way. Would love to hear from you, Anthony, and then Tom and Kevin, of course, would love your thoughts on this too. Oh, I think we had Anthony for a second, then you dropped off. While we try to get you back on, Tom, going back to your experience in 2008, were you doing anything promotion-wise then, kind of in that difficult economic environment that worked for you?
Well, that's kind of the time when I was switching to a full managed services type, engagement. That's where I made the choice that if you wanted to do business with my company, you had to be under a long-term agreement and you had to pay before the month started. So that's kind of where I pivoted to that model. Now, one of the things that came out of that time is I kind of, I spent a lot of time with my key clients and what they could do for me in terms of referrals. And I came up with a really interesting referral program that I can kind of throw out there real quick. So I looked at referral programs out there and people had point systems and they had, all kinds of rules with it and who the money went to. And what I did was I had a very simple one-page referral program. And if you referred a client and they brought in a contract that was $2,500 a month or more, once I had been paid for 2 months on that contract, I showed up at the office of who referred me. And it was usually, I targeted office managers with this program. And I had a little agreement, and it was in my contract too, that the payment would go to the person who referred. And I would show up at that 2-month period with a little contract to sign and $1,000 cash, $1,100 bills. And I will tell you what, this was a very effective referral program. I mean, I had office managers in different offices that had gotten it 3 or 4 times in a year. So I just replaced kind of that. And my approach was, I'm going to get the best clients out of my existing clients. And that's why I kind of talked about it this time. I would focus back in. It might not be as an overt marketing looking in Google AdWords, something like that. I would probably keep my focus on, hey, who really knows me and trusts me and can speak best to how I'm handling this situation? Because they might be able to make a call for me, or they might have heard from someone they know in business that's having a problem. And this client who knows how I've handled their stuff now and maybe all the way back to the Great Recession can speak to me and give me a referral in there.
Thanks for that, Tom. Yeah, we got some good discussion about the word discounts. Let's get some opinions going. And so, yeah, some good points here that there's some discounts can be problematic, right? one of the big issues is you establish that becomes kind of your baseline, and then it's hard to ramp up after that. This is something that we covered during our previous chat too, where based off the obvious, the circumstances now where there's a lot of companies out there struggling, this is something that's coming up a lot, where there's some MSPs who are trying to be more proactive in terms of being flexible, offering, going to their clients and basically just saying like, hey, we're open to being flexible right now with you, and trying to start that narrative and own it. And then others who are getting lots of these requests of people wanting to scale back. I don't want to get, it's a really interesting discussion. Tom, any kind of other thoughts you have about this?
I want to jump in there real quick. A couple things. Yeah, clarification. So if it was an owner who referred me, so often I targeted for the program like office managers, because they usually had the in and they were motivated to do it. But if it was an owner of a client, one of my clients that referred me to a new client, then that would often just become a credit where I might, like their next month might be free or something like that. So I think that's kind of how I handle that. And I would I think discount is in here, but let's also differentiate between discount and deferred payments, because I think that's an important differentiation. And we kind of went over in our last one 2 weeks ago, these force majeure clauses, and below them, we had a series of proposed language you might drop into an email or an addendum to your contract where you state, we're reducing your amount this month, but it goes back up at this point. So there's a timeline, or we're going to reduce it and then you can pay us back over a certain amount of time. And I think deferred payments might be a much better choice in many cases, not to be confused with discounting.
Yeah, and the ability to self-finance too, like if you're not accepting credit cards, if you're, that's the other thing. It's like there are different ways to where now you could change your, payment types, things like that. You start to automate that whole process. And now suddenly when people can pay you with a card, whereas before they had to mail you a check, first of all, I'm sure that check's not coming on time lately. Yeah. And secondly, they're able to basically finance it themselves with no effect to you other than the merchant fees that, you're being charged. And so if you are, one of the MSPs that haven't adapted that yet, and, definitely now is the time. You need to make it easier for them to pay you, whether it's full amount or not.
For anyone who's interested, I just shared Tom's document with the force majeure language that covers quite a few things, right, Tom? But
yeah, we have a blog post out about this as well, too. So the blog post kind of summarizes it and has some more information.
Yeah, I can share that as well. So going back to, Sammy, if you don't mind, let's launch another poll. We've been talking a lot about marketing, and we should absolutely come back to that. I want to hear more about, we've got some more specific things to talk about there. But what about on the sales side? I'm just kind of curious. Oh, sorry. Yes. Let's go to this poll. So what's the top focus and challenge right now? This kind of goes back to something we've been talking about throughout this, but is it that you're now kind of rethinking who you're trying to reach, rethinking your vertical or your ideal customer target? Is it that you're really just looking for like, okay, we got that down. We just need to know, we're focused on what are the right types of activities right now. And then how are you struggling with having to scale back on your staff or your budget, and really working out how you're going to deliver on your plan? Getting some pretty clear answer here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Vast majority, we just need to we want to get activities going. Let's do it. Let's get some ideas. And so you guys can go ahead and scroll down, everyone who's attending here. You'll see that we have a whole section with this labeled ideas to steal. And we've covered some of them here already. And some of these are linked to in Kevin's blog. He's got very specific ideas here that everyone can get going now. So as you guys are reading out that, maybe if you have questions, you want to launch out that. But I'm also interested in hearing more from the people who are doing things right now. What's something, has anyone tried anything new? since this all started that is working for them, or if it's not new and it's something tried and true, just any other ideas that you want to share with the rest of the crowd here.
Or, Jonathan, maybe even it's just a win. It could
Sure.
even be something, it'd be very interesting to us if it was something in the moment that came about during the last month, like from inception, but also maybe it's something that was a conversation that was started months ago. And maybe what's been happening has triggered the ability for that new contract to land, for that deal to happen. But something like that would be interesting. And maybe that, if we got a good story about that, maybe someone wants to come on live with us.
And I could say that, now at least what I've found is it's like an excellent time to experiment. And that's one of the things that we're doing. We have more kind of tests and experimental campaigns right now than we ever have, just because there's like the supply and demand of digital ads right now there's a lot of supply and the demand is like teetering. And so the risk is very low. We're basically, our costs are decreasing. So we're able to now experiment with some things that like we haven't done before. And when we do find things that, we're kind of stumbling upon some things like types of ads and bidding strategies and things like that, we're just betting big, because why not? But we have a full funnel in place, and the MSPs that we work with, like we're trying to get them prepared so that once they do find these activities to either generate awareness or just generate traffic in general, like it's one thing to get it, and then what are you doing with it once you have it? And so that's kind of the thing, is like you really need to be looking at that holistically, look at your strategy in its entirety, determining like, okay, now is the time to be generating awareness. But once I get that attention, how can I build out like a funnel in the back end so that this isn't just a bubble of activity that'll go away once I actually need it?
And this goes into a whole thing with, we can talk about with the folks who do have dedicated salespeople. Would love to talk about that a little bit. But as I think Sammy or Tom pointed out, we've got Don here. Don, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Well, it's kind of frantic, and just to let you all know, I'm new at this. We just went LLC this year, so I actually printed out all my stuff. I was ready to go knock on door to door, and I knocked on a bunch of doors, made local friends with business owners, and just getting them to know who I am and what we're doing, and have a number to call. So that was my whole strategy. But then since this happened, I knew I had to immediately change that strategy. So basically throw out all of my printed material and then come up with some material to put out on the web. So a little bit frantic, looking for, stumbling through stock photos and just trying to make it look pretty, because I'm doing this myself, and I found what I found helpful. It didn't bring any customers, but it started a lot of conversations. So I know it's a good opportunity, is just being out on Facebook, looking at the local towns around me and just jumping in there and seeing what people are saying, and then just chiming in. And once they get to know me, then I can actually let them know what I can do to help them, hear what their needs are, and it's kind of a good intro into a conversation with some of them,
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, I mean, are you hearing similar things? Are you working with some people who are in kind of similar in Don's position right now?
Yeah, and Don, in addition to the, Facebook groups and things like that, even just getting a sense for like, if you're pretty early, in your journey as an MSP, you might not have any kind of specialization or anything, but that's the real areas I think you can tune into. Subreddits are a great spot. So, there's a subreddit for essentially every industry. There's actually several of them. If you're part of like the MSP subreddit, then it's a pretty active community. People exchange ideas. They are constantly like asking for help from their peers, different problems. So like if you want to get tuned in to what's actually happening, like in commercial real estate, in the dentist industry, in healthcare or whatever, that's one of the first places that you can go. And then just to figure out like kind of what the narrative is, what are they talking about, what are they struggling with, you can also at the same time create content and then distribute ads in that same exact subreddit. and targeted only to that subreddit.
Excellent.
So think about that, where now every time you happen upon like a large and active community that fits your vertical, create content based on what people are talking about, and then run the ad right there where they're talking about it, and so you'll start to see engagement that way. It's not you can also contribute, and that's something, Don, maybe that's something that you want to do, is like start to help people and answer questions. If you find anything that they're talking about that's technology specific that relates, or just is loosely related to something that you have subject matter expertise in, then jump in. But at the same time, you could be covering both bases by also running ads there as well.
I got you. That's really good advice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, for coming on. And I see that a lot of people were talking. Jason, you've offered to share your deck after you're creating for a webinar, which is great. And I actually came across. I'm gonna have to look for it, but I came across another example too. Of a webinar deck where, again, it's kind of going back to the basics, but the shift to work from home. But anything like that where you can get in front of your local community, chamber of commerce, things like that. I think it can be obviously a huge thing. And sharing actually the content, helping each other out with like, here's decks I'm using, things like that, I think is an awesome thing. So Jason, you're the man for thinking about that and offering to share it up. And I'm going to add a link into the doc later too when I find it.
Jonathan, one thing you mentioned sharing, and something that I've noticed recently, specifically with Facebook ads, there's been an increase definitely in sharing when it comes to like COVID related content, at least from the campaigns that I've jumped into, like with MSPs, kind of on sessions that we're doing. Which has been very interesting. Is like normally they'll put out a campaign, it'll be like tech related, targeted to a specific industry maybe, and you don't really get, like, you get traffic from it, but you don't get real engagement. Now they're putting out, their messages has changed. Maybe it's like a short video and they're talking about, email security during COVID. And now suddenly, like, those are getting shares from just everyday people that normally wouldn't engage in that type of content. So just something that, I've found interesting recently.
So I just, to everyone, I dropped in a link to another kind of remote workforce technology webinar that an MSP on Reddit shared. Again, I'll add that to the doc too. I got an interesting point though, Kevin. I'd love to hear your response about this. As you were talking, we got a comment from Jay. Thanks again, Jay, for being active here. He says, "Am I the only one? My clients and prospects do not want to hear from me about COVID."
Yeah, Jonathan, this is something that we kind of talked about too. My thing would be coming across to my clients with strength and answering their questions, helping. But I would try to make it, we're business as usual. We're experts in dealing with situations and disaster. And so this is just going to get done the job. So I'm kind of the same way. I'd probably veer more towards offering that assistance when asked for, but I would probably keep it kind of on the down low a little bit.
Well, then it goes into, again, like thinking ahead a little bit and thinking about as things start to come back, what is that new normal going to look like? We've had this mentioned in the comments too. What is that world going to look like? It probably is the case in some industries where you are going to have a lot of people who continue staying at home, but you're going to have other industries where everyone does come back. But things are going to be different. So thinking about that and starting position content that way, working on it early on. Again, this goes back to, let's see, I'm going to go back to the doc, and Sammy, you could actually even pull it up so we can have a visual here. There is under recalibrating the what, ideas to steal, go down to the very last bullet point. It says, be thinking about what's coming next. We have these ideas from Kevin is a hyperlink. This is a blog post that Kevin put together that I thought was awesome. And you guys should definitely check it out. It's got again, these ideas to be working on now, so you're kind of ahead of the game a little bit. Yeah,
and Jonathan, real on the last comment too, like while we're getting into this, I would almost want put it this way, I would rather my clients tell me to go away than tell me like, where were you when I needed you a month from now? You know what I mean? So like, I don't think that there's any way that you can oversaturate yourself at the moment, assuming that you are actually providing value. And so like, think about that, when you go through these ideas and like putting content together and whatever, you would rather this be coming from you than one of your clients like seeing it from another provider on LinkedIn, and now suddenly they're like in their funnel and not in yours.
That is a good point. So we're coming down on time a little bit. I want to make sure that we touch on something for the folks here that have salespeople. And so let's get a sense of how much time to spend on this topic or not. Sammy, would you mind launching this other poll that's all about, do you currently have dedicated salespeople working? Yeah, and so based off this, we can kind of get a sense of whether we want to spend time on this topic, whether we want to kind of go back into some of the other things that are coming up. And it looks like we got about 2/3 of the people who do not currently have salespeople working on them, and about a third that, or a quarter that do. Kevin or Tom, do you just for the people who do, just to quickly touch on this, is there anything that, what are you guys thinking about in terms of how are you handling your salespeople right now? Are you having them do some other things? Are you having them kind of shift their focus in some different ways due to all this?
Well, before Kevin goes, I would just like to say, is there someone out there that has something they're doing with the salesperson that can maybe wants to jump on with us? Type it in the chat. We'll have you come on for a minute. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if you do have people that are, generally closers and are used to just closing, I mean, this is a challenging time for them, right? I mean, they've spent their entire careers probably doing one thing, which was like hunting down deals, and now they're in an awkward position where they feel like they can't, or maybe they feel like they still can, and management is telling them not to. That's the other thing that, it could be kind of like an internal conflict. But, ultimately, I think you should never stop reaching out. It's just a matter of what is your message when you do. Kind of the help first thing is a great idea. But ultimately, like, you might find that there's a deal sitting there waiting for you and you just didn't ask, So I would, really try to figure out the best messaging to where you're still leaving yourself open to where you can find an active deal in the moment, but you're still coming at it with like a less aggressive approach.
Tom, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, my thing would be, I always had my salespeople do quite a bit of account management as well. So if it was an account that they brought on, I kind of turned over pieces of that to them to kind of maintain the relationship. And I would probably have them involved to a good degree in these work from home scenarios, in not any of the technical work, but in understanding that process and how we moved clients over, what we did for them, documenting that, and coming up with some materials that could be used maybe to sell those solutions to other clients going forward.
Got a comment from Christina here that I want to see if you guys can help address. So she says that we're a small MSP trying to grow. This was going to be a large growth year for us, but it's stagnated. I think a lot of people can probably commiserate with that right now. I mean, this has changed a ton of plans and a ton of strategy. Kevin, I mean, you're working with a ton of clients. Anyone in the same boat where big plans for this year and there's a feeling now of like, man, this just completely devastated things?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has big plans, right? So that's the thing is, some are definitely getting hurt more than others. And what I found is the common denominator is really like who their customers are. As in general, I think the IT industry is, kind of the unsung heroes in a lot of this. But unfortunately, there could be like a domino effect coming from the customers that we service. So, that's kind of one of the things where I think the big lesson for everybody is to diversify your client mix. And while you want to approach marketing in general from a vertical specific place, I think that will always overperform when against generic, kind of generalized marketing. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only customer, type that you want to go after. So I think that's really the big lesson for everybody is that stay with a vertical specific marketing strategy, but diversify and, kind of even if you have to create 3, 4, 5 different marketing funnels that are standalone, that's kind of the approach that you're going to need if you want to kind of future proof yourself so that this doesn't happen again.
And I'm looking at the comments from Dan here too. Oh yeah, and then Trevor brings a good point. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people having their plans shifted, and yeah, Amir bring 2 salespeople on staff and have been planning on getting them educated on technical subjects rather than the sales subject. Opinions on this approach. It kind of goes to what you guys are thinking, Tom. It's kind of in line with what you're talking about, shifting to account management, right?
I don't know if he's having them. I mean, I wouldn't try to have a salesperson learn technical. I always found that my best sales were never on a technical basis. They were on a business and relationship level.
I agree with Tom on that for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what he means on that. If he wants to come on with us, but I would probably, if I had salespeople, I would probably have them being beefed up on their sales techniques. Maybe do some sales training, doing some Sandler courses, something like that, or and like I said, working with existing account management and figuring out how we can help clients expand that need to, or make plans for future sales once things let up a little bit.
Yeah, or just from an account management standpoint, fine tuning your kind of like long-term harvesting strategy for increasing the lifetime value of your existing customers. And so that's the other thing is like when there are few customers to be had, the value of them will increase. So what was once your least important customer now is a customer, and that, that's more important than it ever was. And so starting to really like focus in on, okay, I have these customers. What are maybe some like email automation, maybe like a new quarterly business review kind of like rundown and presentations and things like that. All of this now you can start to put together and implement from an account management standpoint to figure out like by the end of the year this year, like I want to focus now on harvesting like way more opportunities from my existing customers, because ultimately that's going to be cheaper than going out and finding new ones.
Yeah, definitely. Going back on the technical point, I mean, again, Amir, if you want to come on, I'm happy to talk, but I don't know, guys. I mean, I think, not train them to be technicians by any means, but I do see the value in getting them more familiar with this world and being able to kind of back up, know what they're talking about. It seems to make sense to me. Just having them be like more educated on their audience. So
yeah, I mean, we're just kind of looking for clarification, like the extent of what it is. Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. And maybe if it's just bringing them up to speed on technology, because I have seen situations in MSPs where the salespeople start speaking about something like spam filtering, and they're calling it, and it's actually some kind of security software, and there's confusion about the actual technologies being sold. So if it's something like that, absolutely.
Right, for sure. I would definitely chip in on that. Thanks for hosting this awesome webinar. But what we are focusing on with the two salespeople that we have is core understanding of technical aspect of things. So perhaps it wouldn't be technical, but get them re-educated on what is disaster recovery, what is business continuity. We found some courses on some websites that give a fundamental basic idea, and what I believe might help them translate that better when they are making that sales call. Not to make it confuse it with becoming a technical call. We have a sales engineer for that. But the initial call, if they can convey the message better, and they have a little bit more technical knowledge, I think it would help. But I would definitely like opinion from everyone else here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Clarification on technology so that, like I said to you, you don't go out there and they don't embarrass you with talking about mixing the technology. That's a good use of time. Absolutely. Having them do some training for your particular applications that you resell, understanding what they mean, how to pitch them effectively.
Cameron in the chat had a great point too, is like teaching and focusing on like metaphors. And so, because ultimately, and I think Tom would agree that, the reason you don't want your sales team to be overly technical is because they are the like liaison on the front line that can speak in like lay terms and really relate to customers, whereas your technicians and engineers sometimes can't. And so, but, kind of coming at it from a metaphor standpoint of, okay, here's like what you need to know from a technical standpoint, but here's the best way to translate it to a customer. I think that's almost, more important than knowing the nuts and bolts. Actually, I should say it's definitely more important than knowing the nuts and bolts for a salesperson.
So guys, we're right at the hour here, and we're happy to stay on if people want to keep going with this. Did want to oil change is the best metaphor. Might have to get Cameron on to explain this actually.
Cameron's had a couple good pieces on here. We need to have him jump in for a second.
Yeah, Cameron, why don't you come on and let's get you talking about a couple of things. I did want to say, as we're here at the hour, glad to hear this has been helpful. I did want to call out a couple of things. We're going to be taking next week off. We've been doing this kind of weekly, and the reason we're doing that is we're preparing for a big event on May 7th. And there's a link to it in the doc. Sammy, if you want to pull it up just really quickly, it's our MSP Security Summit. And so we're going to actually be covering some sales and marketing perspective here too. But this is going to be an event where we're having, again, a lot of sessions that are more interactive like this, and it's all about security topics. And so we've got, we're partnering with some people on this. We've got Kyle Hanselman from Huntress is going to be delivering a presentation on, he's switching things. He's not just doing a hacking live demo. He's going to be talking about how to sell security at a time like this. We're also going to be talking about what, having a panel of MSPs talking about what they're doing policies and procedures wise, especially with all the shift to remote access and work from home. So a ton of good stuff there. Sammy, if you want to get that link up, that's cool, but otherwise people can follow it on their own too. So with all that said, Cameron, if you want to come on, that's cool. If not, that's all right too. Maybe we can close out on this note. Kevin and Tom, is there anything, we've been talking a lot of good ideas here, a lot of focus on trying to stay active, stay out there, be findable, be helpful. What is one thing, if you could pick one quick activity you could do right now, and it may be a tactic or it may be kind of going back, stepping back and doing a little bit of strategic homework, but Kevin, what's one thing that you think someone should do right now?
I think really right now is a good time to, I think, take control, to really zoom out and look at it. Because if you don't have complete control over your sales and marketing, whether you're outsourcing or maybe you're not doing any of it, now is really the time to start focusing on, because you don't want to be in a position where you're relying on a vendor or someone else to help get you through this. You might have lost a bunch of customers, but now you're saying like, okay, well, my vendor has not pivoted the way that I would have pivoted. Their message has not changed. And so we're kind of getting to a point where this is just very confusing for everyone. And it's most confusing for the people that have the least amount of control over it, because they're kind of just sitting ducks right now. And so that's kind of what I've been really talking to MSPs and helping them do, is to just, okay, you're in this position. It's okay that you've gotten to this point, but like now's the time to start taking back a little more control of the wheel and say, like, I need to start learning how to create internal content. And I need to, figure out like, what are the processes I'm putting together to do this? And, how am I distributing it once it's out there? What's the benefit that I'm gaining from it? Like, how are people opting in? And then how am I like nurturing that audience that I built for leads and to put into like my sales process? So that is really, I think, the biggest takeaway, is that there are people that really have been left high and dry from an MSP perspective, because like this wasn't part of the plan that they've purchased from someone. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I mean, that to me is kind of like my biggest takeaway right now.
And I would say for everyone here, when it comes time to actually doing some of this stuff, especially as we saw in the poll, if this is new to a lot of people, both we have a lot of resources on the Ninja RMM site in our resources center. I'll add the link here too. I got a lot of links to add to this doc, so please come back to it after this webinar is done. But we have a lot of like specific getting into social ads, SEO. We have a lot of specific marketing materials and help you get started on that. And I know Kevin does too on his blog, which is a great blog. So you should check that out too. It looks like we've got Cameron on.
Jonathan, I was in a I had a quick thing how I use my time.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
Yeah, one thing I would do is I would sit down and make a list. I'd have 2 lists. One would be my top 5 clients that I really are most critical to my business, where my revenue comes from. I put them down on one list. I make another list of the top 5 clients that maybe have been having problems these days, problems adjusting to the new work from home, or just, maybe need a little more hand holding, or, you need to reach out to. I would call each one of those clients on the phone and talk to ideally the owner or the primary point of contact, office manager, whoever that might be. I'd have a conversation, as someone spoke about earlier, just how can we help? But then I'd also get into, talking about where they are with things with their company, what their future needs might be. Just have just like a real down to earth, human to human conversation that makes sure that you're not just behind that computer the whole time, that you're a real voice, and give them assurances. And I think that this does a couple things that solidifies the relationship. And we've been talking a lot about referrals and marketing and salesmanship here. These are the kind of actions that down the road are going to get you those referrals as well.
Really great points, Tom. Having lists, getting stuff done, because there's so much of this, that there's so much that could be done. It's really easy to spin wheels sometimes. So really great point in terms of like actually just getting on the phone and getting active now. So Cameron, we got you on the line. I am thinking back to what we wanted you specifically to add. You can add anything you'd like.
He had website pages he was creating.
That would be a great thing to talk about.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time what we're doing is advising kind of things that are, it just depends on kind of the topic that we're seeing for the day. Because obviously the biggest thing is that things are changing almost on an hourly basis. So whatever the biggest headline that is trending at that time, it's the best case to kind of fit things in with that. Either to reassure people that, hey, this is a panic, this is just basically fear mongering or something like that, and to catering to what people already kind of know to be true, but at the same time saying, here's some solutions and how you can help it affecting you and your company. And here's some things and resources and deals like that. So for example, we did one on how to help yourself secure PPP funding or things of that nature, and how to allocate your staff so you could decrease or how to use your staff remotely and how to set them up so that way you weren't having to have them eat up all their vacation time, and that you could stabilize your company. Things of that nature. That's what we've tried to focus is. So it's always, okay, here's what we can do to help you in that, and here's some of the other tools and resources to help them stay in, and also how to pay for ourselves, essentially.
What I love about that, Cameron, thanks so much for getting the phone and coming on and taking the time to do this. It's such a good point. And it kind of ties into something that I've been thinking about too, where under the list of ideas to steal, being resilient, because it's showing that you're taking this tone and this approach of, hey, this is a tough time. We're solutions focused. We're going to find a solution to these problems. We'll do it together. I like you're
focus
tackling it head
ourselves,
on.
and that is our entire branding. That's really where, and I do agree with some of the earlier comments, the switching between sales and marketing, because when you're doing sales, it's all about what can you do for us, as opposed to what can we do for you. Whereas if marketing and sales is done properly, it's more of like, well, this solution is going to help you because of X, Y, and Z, and it's going to solve these problems that you already know you're dealing with. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship at that point. But at the same time, if they don't understand why they need you and why they need your services and so forth, or for example, they might not even be your ideal client and they can't use you at all, but being able to identify that ahead of the curve and saving yourself and them both the grief of that ordeal. Because when we get out of this, the organizations that were very, very sales focused and sold services that the company didn't need, like on-premise phones or something like that, when obviously all their staff is working off their cell phones anyway, things of that nature. And I know that's a bad example, but because you can still have a phone work from home. But obviously, if you're advising poor solutions, then that is going to bite you. People are less likely to actually stay with you at that point. And so that's why we've always had that focus in that brand where we focus on, well, what can we do to mitigate this? What can we do to foresee these trends? And this is actually something that we've been talking about for a while. So I'm one of those weird IT guys that I have a variety of backgrounds in that, so I can frame a house and I can also program a computer and everything in between. However, again, our focus with this is what we do is we'll tell them, hey, with your thing, we do, or with your services or with your niche, I would not over leverage yourself here. And it's almost like a financial advisor at that point too.
Right.
And we've actually had to tell our clients, no, this is like, once we've looked at the company and how they're structured and everything else, we'll actually tell them like, hey, we do not want you to be a client. Like, and not that we wouldn't love to have you, but these issues need to be addressed first, because these will put you out of business quicker than anything else. And at that point, we can't help you, and we've just put you in a worse spot. So it's basically having their best interest at heart again.
Well, that's how you gain trust. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's honestly a lot of our clients. It's kind of interesting because the relationship that we have, at least with most of our clients, is that they will literally write us blank check every month. No questions asked. Literally, we usually get, I would say, like 15 blank checks, and they say, whatever you advise, whatever you think we need to get done, just do it. And they trust us enough. We obviously aren't going to abuse that ever, because once that trust is destroyed, it's gone. So it's basically making sure that once you have that type of relationship with that client, to make sure that you back it up and always, again, have their best interests at heart from the ground up. And it's also, again, focusing on quality, not quantity of clients.
That's a great point too. Cameron, I'm just kind of curious, what are you specializing in a vertical, or you get clients across the board?
So we focus on any clients that are always looking for ways to improve, that are very proactive. And so it's more focusing on a mindset as opposed to a specific vertical.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And it sounds like, I mean, you're being very mindful about who you're bringing on. You're being very mindful of your brand and your overall approach to things. It sounds like it's paying off for you too. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Well, I mean, it's easy to try to be the jack of all trades for all things. And I realized that wasn't helping anyone. And I think we've all been in that situation where, especially when we first get started, where we will almost take on everything just because we need the money and you basically need to survive and pay bills. So I get it. There's plenty. However, I have yet to really find one of those situations that I didn't end up actually regretting later on for taking on, whether they were just a difficult client, whether they fought me on every turn for everything we advised. And it was just a nightmare to deal with them. And I'm sure other people can relate on those type of clients. But, and that's why I started focusing on the mindset. It's like, okay, what is the ideal client going to have, or what are they going to be looking for? Are they people like, for example, we had one healthcare clinic that literally was using like free Gmail for patient records. And they were using everybody was using their personal cell phones. They literally had their passwords posted on stick-it notes on the desk. Everybody was sharing the same passwords. It was literally a nightmare from heck. And they were basically still giving me complaints on even $10 licenses or anything to help secure their data, or even setting up like an Active Directory server. So clients like that, they're not worth it, no matter how much they give you, or how desperate you are for funds, because that will always come back to bite you. And so again, it's focusing on the clients, not only what you can do for them, but they can what their mindset is and where they want to be going. Because if they are willing to cut corners now, they're going to cut corners later on too, and it's always going to bite you again on that front. And so again, like, look at what your ideal vertical is and what you can do to provide. And I would almost suggest providing an all or nothing solution. Either you take full accountability for their entire like tech infrastructure, or you say, look, like, this is probably not a best fit for us. Or what you have to do is say, if you've established yourself as a niche, to say, hey, we are only a help desk. That's the only thing that we have the capacity to do. We don't deal with firewalls. We don't do with that. Or, hey, I can do it, but I can't do it that well. Mm-hmm. Then I would focus on either having strategic partners or understanding what the other companies or pieces of the puzzle need to bring to the table as well for you to be successful. Because otherwise it becomes like a finger pointing game and things of that nature. So what that means and what that translates to is, if I come in and plug into a system, they already have several different other outsourcing partners, or say, for instance, they have an internal IT department. They just need help in certain facilities or certain regards to make sure that the rest of the areas that they're not proficient in are handled correctly. Right. That could be like Office 365.
I think we're at a point that we kind of need to wrap things up here.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So, no, that's okay, Cameron. I mean, you bring up so many good points, and stick around, because I want to, before we all jump, guys, one more thing I just want to share. This is kind of an interesting practical thing. You bring up launching new web pages. Sammy, can you go back up to the doc under where it says, is it even appropriate? It's up at the top, the bottom of the first page, the example of dedicated IT. Let's bring up this page. It's going to take a little bit to load. So dedicated IT is a Ninja RMM customer. They're on the larger side. And Chris, who's managing some of their marketing, just shared this webpage that they built. And Dedicate IT, if you go to their site and look around, going back to some of your points, Cameron, they are who they are. They have a very strong brand. As you can see from this GIF, they are very, they have a certain tone about them that they're not apologetic about. And so they are very strong focused, and they're selective in their clients.
Where they want to go. And
right.
That really helps, because that actually helps in going back to the sales. And the whole point of that rant for me was essentially, if you know who you are and what you want, then they don't have to necessarily question whether they need you or not. Brand speaks for everything, and that does the sales for you, as opposed to having to push things down. Like if you have a clearly defined niche, like, hey, this is if you are a good client, this is if you are not a good client. And we actually just spell that out for clients in our services, saying, hey, if this is what you're looking for, this is what you need, we can help you, and we love to be there. Otherwise, there's some free resources that we can point you in the direction and that to help you out. But otherwise, this is kind of what we need to do, or what we need from you to be successful and to help you out.
Such a hard thing to do, especially now. But I mean, I think you're right. Being very forthcoming and directing into another helpful way, and just being completely forthright about it. We're going to be a good fit to some people, but not everybody. And here's going back to this.
It actually builds better loyalty too.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. Because let's be honest, sales suck. I don't know anybody that really actually loves sales, especially cold calling or anything else.
Right.
And so just building that relationship and showing them, it's like, hey, because I can't tell you how many times we've even referred clients that were not an ideal fit to other clients or other competitors even, and saying, hey, this is their niche. I would probably say that they're better off. And it was hard to say no to that revenue at the time. But at the end of the day, I actually found it would return to us in tenfold, because they either would refer us to other people and say, hey, this is their niche. They've already told me what they're really good at. And now they've referred like 3 other companies to us. So we actually tripled the money that we otherwise would have made from that one client that was not a good fit and would have probably bit us in the backside.
And it takes up your bandwidth, right? And also, I mean, life is short on a personal level too. Working with people that a situation that's going to go sour. I mean, that's not what anyone has time or.
Nobody plans on a relationship going sour, right? And you always think, well, yeah, I should be able to do that. But also being able to be self-aware enough too, to say, hey, these are things that are or are not within our capabilities or our range, right?
Right.
And so, because I mean, honestly, most of us, at least on the tech side, can do almost everything in the help desk. But in reality, we all know that we are really good in certain areas. And if you aren't, that's really where I would advise, is establishing that niche and that brand. And I know that's kind of hard to do, but that's what's actually going to persevere during these times. Because if you think that this is the only crash that we're going to have during our careers, then you're kidding yourselves. This is going to happen at least once every 10 years or so. So just face that reality. But the ones that are holding strong are the ones that have a clearly defined brand. They know who they are. All those companies that I've seen are not struggling at all. And so that's what's going to help you and hold you over as well. So it's not just in their benefit, but it's in your benefit.
Absolutely. And maybe we can do too, looking at other examples of, and it doesn't have to be necessarily just another MSP. I mean, obviously another MSP is a very applicable example, but take a look at like Dedicate IT's page here. There's some takeaways here. This is not going to be for everybody, obviously, but I do think they do a good job of some messaging here where just with this line, they've been helping companies work remotely for almost 20 years, underscoring that like, hey, we've got this. We've been doing this for a while. This is our thing. If you scroll down the page, they do a good job of highlighting specifically what they offer and not trying to say they offer everything necessarily. And then they also have their own kind of tone about it that's going to be self-identifying for the right types of clients they want to work with too. Would love to see if anyone else has other examples of, and maybe you want to share your own site too, we could add this to the doc. We could even do a collection of, what are some people's pages that they're sharing that are specific to this crisis or work from home that they're building. Maybe that's something that I can work on if people think it'd be interesting. Showing different landing page examples of like, here's people's messaging and things that they're doing around this.
A lot of us, like what I've posted is actually in specific groups. I don't necessarily focus as much on the web page. I do believe, especially for acquiring new clients, that is going to be essential, and then just sharing that specific web page. But going into specific groups where discussion is happening and not being salesy about it, but to say, hey, this might be a good resource for you.
Right.
Again, that's kind of what would help on that front. But the main reason that we've had so many of our clients stay with us is because this is something that we were preaching from the beginning, is like, hey, you need to not over leverage yourself. You need to have resources in place like cloud. So we actually we put it as like, hey, how about if they're just sick, or how about if they're dealing with something, they maybe have to go out of state for personal emergency, whatever the case may be. You need to have the ability to where most of your staff can work remotely or have that adaptability to where things aren't going to be a huge system overhaul should you need that. And so when this happened, most of them were already like staged to where it was a simple just setup.
Right.
So it was already, sorry, I have a kids running.
That's okay. That's the new normal too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And no, that's great too. And there's an element to this too, where now, I mean, the good news for all of us is everything that everyone's been preaching is now, you can't come up with a better use case. You don't have to be arguing this stuff as much anymore. You've got a use case that everyone can understand right now. We are at time here. We've gone half an hour over. So thanks everybody for staying on. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us this week. This was awesome having you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
And Tom, thanks again.
Thank you.
And just a reminder for everybody. So we're not going to be doing a live chat next week, but we are in 2 weeks' time on May 7th. We're going to be hosting the MSP Security Summit. Everybody should go to this page, check it out. 6 different sessions on various security topics. Go ahead and register. We'll be recording it even if you can't make it. But that's kind of the next big thing we're going to be doing. And then we're going to jump back into doing some more live chats too following that. So thanks everybody once again. We're going to follow up with an email that has this recording. I'll update the Google Doc with all the resources we've been talking about. And stay in touch. Reach back out with email if you have any questions. If you want us to cover another topic, or you want us to dive deeper into something, you got the email invite. Just respond to me. I'll see it, and I would love your feedback. So thanks everybody. I think this is really helpful for us just internally. We love connecting with everybody here. Hope it's been good for you guys too. But with that, I think we'll sign off.
All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks everybody.